Okay. I love that. Okay, so we are now at week 10. Wow. So there's only 2 more weeks left to go, 2 more Zooms left to go. We are at the drop-in Zoom here. We will be doing the drop-in Zoom tonight, and we'll also have a drop-in Zoom next week, but there will be no drop-in Zoom in week 12. So I've already put a notice up on Facebook to that effect. So there's no drop-in Zoom week 12, but what we will be doing in week 12 will be using the whole of that hour to discuss the exam. Okay, and before we get to that Zoom in week 12, I will have pre-released certain information that will be on the exam paper, and that will give you a substantial amount of assistance in directing your review preparation for the exam. And I think, Tam, can you see me still? Yes? No?
I can, but you keep pausing every now and then.
Oh, do I?
Yeah, you're here, but you just keep pausing every now and then. But the actual audio is perfect.
Okay. Not sure what that is. Vagaries of the internet. I've told my kids to stop streaming, but perhaps they've started streaming again. Okay, so getting back to the week 12 Zoom. Before that time, as I said, I'll be pre-releasing some stuff from the exam, and then I am prepared to field questions on that during the week 12 Zoom. So just to confirm, the week 12 Zoom is Thursday the 4th of October. So before that time, I will be releasing certain portions of the exam so that you can think about it on the way through. I probably will be releasing those portions sooner rather than later, so that you've got plenty of time to digest them. But so far as queries go, any and all queries we can discuss on that Thursday, the 4th of October. The reason why I'm doing it this way, well, there's a number of reasons why I'm doing it this way. Firstly, because I appreciate that exams are, they're always a stress fest. So, anything that we can do to minimise your stress level will have a knock-on effect in terms of performance, and your performance will be better if your stress level is lower. And so purely selfishly, it's much nicer if I mark a cohort of 70 odd papers that are meaningfully written than mad panic scrambles of almost unintelligible paragraphs. So yeah, stress levels, number one. Number two, part of the reason why I was a very strong advocate of take-home exams was not only because they generally tend to yield a better standard of answer because you've got more time, but also I think they are much more authentic in terms of real life experience. Now, I'm sorry, I am now getting a message on my computer saying it's a bit unstable, so I'm not exactly sure what's happening. Someone type me a message if I'm cutting out.
You're still here, but you're paused.
I'm paused, am I? Let me just go and make sure that my kids have stopped streaming. Just hold on one second.
You're still paused.
Oh, Okay. Oh, visually your photo is paused. Oh, I'm probably got my finger up my nose or something, am I?
It's not quite that bad.
How funny. I don't quite know whether there's anything I guess there's nothing much I can do. Hang on, what about if I stop the video and then I start video? Is that any better?
You need to move maybe, because it doesn't look like you're, you must be still paused then.
All I can see is tan now.
What I've done is I've just turned my video off briefly just to see if my bandwidth will recover itself. I'm not quite sure why it's doing that. Let me just try closing everything else while I'm talking to you. The other thing is I was going to say, I think that take-home exams are much more authentic in terms of what you experience out there in the real world. Generally speaking, it would almost border on negligence for you to, have a client sit in front of you, unload a whole lot of factual detail, and then, expect off the cuff, without any assistance of, detailed consideration, to then expect you guys to provide some kind of answer. I think that's artificial in the extreme. So that's why I think, take homes are far better. However, the accreditation bodies, I don't know if other lecturers have told you the background, but the accreditation bodies for the law program have a very different view to the likes of humble old me. And so what's the push has been from the accreditation bodies to introduce exams across the board. So that's what we've done. However, I think if I can provide you with some information to consider prior to, Mary's saying it's no better. Okay, we'll just have to soldier on as well as we can. Yeah, if I can provide you with a little bit of information, that assists you in terms of the advice that you're expected to provide during the actual exam itself, well, then I think that's probably worthwhile. So that's the way we're going to do it. I am a rebel, but don't worry, I've already run it past the powers that be. The Dean knows, and he has approved it. So that's the way we're going to run. I will tell you, and I'll repeat this probably, all of this stuff I will repeat in the week 12 Zoom, because it's, going to be crucial for everybody to know about. But there is the general structure of it is that there is a part A and a part B in the exam. Part A requires 2 IRACs. And part B has 8 short questions. Okay, so the part A, the 2 IRACs, that totals 30 marks. In the part B, the 8 questions, there's a total of 20 marks. Okay, so that's the way that it will run. Obviously, it all adds up to 50. And in terms of part A, each IRAC, I'm just looking here on the actual exam script, each IRAC is worth 15 marks. And in terms of part B, they range from 1 mark through to 4 marks. So there's a couple of 1 markers, there's 1 4 marks, and the rest are, like 2 and 3 marks each. Okay. I will give you more assistance in relation to Part B. Oh, Mary's shared some kind of file. Hang on a second, let me. Anyway, so I'll give you more assistance in relation to Part B, probably.
It's just what I'm seeing, that's all.
Oh, okay. This will be hilarious. Yeah, so we'll talk about Part B later. Part A, oh, awesome. Well, I haven't got my finger up my nose at least, so that's something. Okay, so Part A, like I said, the two IRACs there, both of those IRACs relate to one single set of factual, scenario, one factual scenario. And I give you a number of different clauses in a contract that you need to know about. And then I give you about a page and a half of facts where the parties engage in conduct. And you need to kind of match up what's going on with their conduct and how the clauses in the contract bear upon their conduct. Okay, so both of the IRACs are squarely in the area of termination, and one of them looks at damages also. The other one's mainly termination. So you can start your revision now in terms of those IRACs. I mean, as you're well aware, the week on termination was fairly massive. So the contract terms I will be releasing before the actual exam. The contract terms that are on the actual exam paper, I will be releasing prior to the exam. Obviously, I won't be releasing any of the short answer questions, but I will certainly, I will give you some assistance as to which areas I will be looking at more or less in the in the short answer stuff later.
Sorry, AJ. Sorry. So you're saying that you release the contract terms. Is that the full set of facts that you're going to release, or just those clauses that you referred to?
Just the clauses.
Cool.
The clauses. Yep. And then in week, I think once you see the clauses, it will be almost, you'll be able to pretty much work out the areas that you need to review, if that makes sense. So
could we, in essence, put together our own little, I mean, it's obviously not going to necessarily be the answers because we won't know the full facts, but we could kind of start putting together a little bit of answers, and that's something that we can take into the exam? Yes.
Yeah, that's the idea. Yeah, that's the idea. Because in the exam, the time is so short. We really have to maximise your writing time. I don't want you to be stuffing around and looking things up, and I understand that the exam papers are all one-sided, so you're flipping backwards and forwards from page to page. It's a bit of a pain. If you can take in the contract clauses with you, then you will already have highlighted them and fiddled them out and done whatever you needed to do, so you don't have to worry so much about flipping backwards and forwards on your pages when it's actually exam time. You've already got your contract clauses there. all you really have to worry about is looking at the scenario and, working out the advice that you will provide in each of the IRACs. So, yes, that was a very long-winded way of saying, you should be able to put together your own little IRACs before we even start the game, which would be good. So, once again, we have Susan O'Snooty and Paparazzi in the exam. So we're very familiar with them now. There is a different contract at issue in the exam. And as I said, those contract terms will be coming your way. What are we now? Week 10. I think it's probably sensible if I release them during, I'll try and release them, when are we? When is your actual exam? Do you know when your exam? Tuesday?
Yeah. We get literally no time to study, to be honest. Our last session is on the 4th and our exam's on the 12th. So it's pretty tight.
Oh, it's on the 12th. Okay.
Yeah.
Well.
I mean, it's not bad, but it's a lot shorter. Like in the past, I've had a much bigger break.
Yeah. Look, I will try and release the contract terms for you later on tonight then. And that gives you what, 1, 2, it gives you like 3 weeks.
3 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, and then, you can go through the contract terms carefully and, join the dots and do the review that you need. Let me just have another look at the terms for you. Yeah. Once you have the terms, and now that you know that I'm focusing mainly on termination and damages, then you should be pretty right to go forward. So that even though you're tight, if you have time now to get cracking on that revision. And I've already told you, when we went through and we did our termination week, and I said to you, progressive mailing house in Tabali is super useful, and Lorinda and Capalbar Park is super useful. And remember I said, do yourself up this little, well, obviously not handwritten. I'm just old school. But, and I would also look at, and I think I told you this before, Cheval and the Builders Licensing Board. So I guess if you did, you could even do yourself you could do 1 page per case, or you could do however it makes sense to you. But you just want to try and minimise your shuffling in the exam. I find it's easier if you can have something like all on 1 page. So maybe if you did 3 columns for the 3 cases, so that you've just got everything all summarised there. And I will require you to have read all of those cases in full. Okay, so you need to have read Progressive Mailing House in Tabali, Lorinda and Capalbar Park, and Cheval and the Builders Licensing Board, all of those in full, please. So if you can do that on Ostley, it would, I think if you can march in with those case notes under your belt, plus a very close consideration of the contract terms, then I think you'd be, pretty right. I am aware that 3 hours goes by in a snap. I would advise you to do. Look, I don't think that you will find, or you shouldn't find, Part B, those short answer questions. I don't think that you should find them too bad at all. And as I said, I'll give you more guidance about that later on down the track. But I would probably be leaving about, say, just as a, vague suggestion with the usual caveat that, this is a choice that's up to you completely. But I'd probably be spending about, 50 odd minutes on each IRAC, and then just leave the rest of it for the Part B. And that's probably the way I would do it. But obviously, if you want to more or less, it's up to you. Like I said, I don't think that Part B is going to be too much of a worry for you at all. I'd probably tend to this is just my own approach. I like to get the IRACs out of the way first, because they're the really heavy analytical, pieces that you've got to sit down and get technical with. So you don't want to run out of time. And I find sometimes the people that tend to start on the short answer questions, the problem I find with doing it that way is that some students, because they're so nervous, and because there is like a few 3-mark ones and 1 4-mark, all of a sudden, like I found this last year, where I had one of the short answer questions that was like only 4 marks, but the student gave me like more than a page of writing. And you're like, well, this is just 4 marks. You don't need to be, doing all of that. That was a take home, but still, I'd hate for anybody to be trying to do that much work on a 4-mark question in the exam, and then, leaving themselves short on time for a 15-mark question. So do keep your eyes on the time. And I really would encourage you to try and get those IRACs out of the way first up, because then I think what you will find once you've got the IRACs out of the way is, it's almost like the weight's lifted and the clouds parted and the angels sing, and, you can just kind of cruise on through the short answer stuff, and you end up leaving the exam feeling fairly good. If that is my aim for you anyway, if my suggested formula works, please let me know. So that's all I wanted to say about that. Mary says she has another 15th of October.
Our exam got rescheduled.
Oh, it got rescheduled?
It wasn't originally the 12th. It was originally the 16th.
I thought
it got rescheduled to the 12th.
It got rescheduled to the 12th. Okay,
yeah.
Okay. Well, then, all the more important, I'll make those contract terms available for you kind of ASAP, like after our Zoom tonight. I'll whack those up for you, and then you've got maximum time to get your teeth into those. Was there any questions so far on that? Seems to be kind of clear as well. Am I still frozen?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, damn.
You're intermittent. You're still intermittent. You're, hit and miss. Sometimes you're frozen for a few minutes, and then sometimes you're not.
Oh, damn. Should we jump out and then jump back in? What do you reckon? Or is it annoying you, or do you want to just push on?
Doesn't annoy me.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, that's kind of all I wanted to say about the exam at this point. Was there any queries that you had from last week's material?
What was last week again?
It was damages. So this week's stuff, we are looking at remedies in terms of the ACL and equity and restitution. So I'm hoping that we're all good with damages. Yes, good.
I've got all my notes, so I guess I'm just, rely on my notes.
Yeah, cool. In terms of damages, you will need to, as I said, make sure that you look at Cheval and the Builders Licensing Board, because that's kind of, you may find that useful at some point. For tonight's stuff, would you like to, what the actual Zoom tutorial that I wanted to go through looks at is damages under the ACL, because they're a little bit not tricky, but there's just a few different things to think about. And that's why I've chosen that to go through. And also in practice, I think you'll find that the issue of remedies will crop up quite a lot in terms of your misleading deceptive conduct stuff, because that Section 18 stuff is really the bread and butter of what goes on out there in commercial practice. So I want you to be really familiar with the way that you go about thinking about remedies under the ACL. I know you did, all that standard contract stuff to death in Contract A, didn't you? The standard stuff, and the unfair terms and all that kind of stuff. Section 18 is probably, the Contract B equivalent of that, and you do need to be quite familiar with your remedies there. When it comes to, and this is why I've said, if you are, for the likes of Mary, where you are time poor, then, there are swags of stuff in the equitable section that, I don't necessarily really need you to know in detail. Let me just go through. So to be clear, really the main thing that I want you to get out of the equitable remedies section is the specific performance part. That's the main bit that I want you to have a little look at. So I'm just looking for Mary here in the 2013 text. I'll make sure that you read, 25.3, 25.4, 25.5. You need to get across the specific performance stuff. So I'll flip across to the 2018 text. Isn't this a fun little exercise? Two different texts to work from. So for the 2018 text, people, make sure there's the introduction and then it goes straight into specific performance. So make sure that you're across 25.2, 25.3, and 25.4, and your defences are in 25.5. Okay, so that's the main thing that I wanted to cover off there. Now, I'm not a big fan of the 2013 text for that chapter on restitution. It really is a little bit messy. And in fact, both the equitable chapter and the restitution chapter are a bit messy. The 2018 is kind of better. But in terms of the restitution chapter, the main thing really that I want you to take away from the restitution chapter is really, where are we here? 24.4, total failure of consideration. That's here. That's probably, more relevant, I guess, just in my practical experience. a lot of the stuff that they talk about in the text is theoretical.
AJ, don't worry. I'll download the 2018 parts that are relevant. Don't worry. I've already started doing that anyway.
Okay. Well, like I said, the main things really are total failure of consideration from that restitution chapter, and the, like I said, specific performance in the equity chapter. I don't know, unless you're going to be a barrister. I don't know. This might be considered heresy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Among lecturers, but there's not a whole lot of call for detailed consideration of things like, whether or not unjust enrichment is a unifying concept or a unifying principle. I tend to, maybe I'm just like, a jaded practitioner. I see that stuff and my eyes kind of glaze over. Maybe you just pick up the whole book and your eyes glaze over. But yeah, we can go through some of that stuff now, because I wouldn't mind here. Let's see if I can screen share. Now, let's have a wee look here. That's that. Now let me see if I can get rid of that and put the other. No, where's it gone? There it is. Beautiful. Okay. Now let's just see if I can do it. Are you seeing anything there? Are you? It's
no.
You're not?
Oh no, here we go. It's here.
Oh, hang on, I've stopped sharing. Hang on a second, I'll start sharing again. Okay. Close that.
I'm thinking if you keep pausing, then there's a good chance that your screen share is going to keep pausing.
All right. Can you see it now?
No, it's on delay. So when you said that you just stopped sharing it, we still had it. Now it's back.
Now it's back? Okay.
Now I can see it. Yep.
Okay. Well, this can guide our discussions anyway. I'll just get down to where I wanted to get down to. So in terms of specific, well, it's not going to work, I guess, if I type and do it at the same time if you can't see it at the same time. Are you seeing specific performance on your screen now?
No, ACL section 236. Oh, no, now it's...
Yeah. There, it's down now. Now, specific performance.
Okay, we have liftoff. Okay, so what I just wanted to do was briefly look at some of the other stuff that we don't need to look at in the Zoom for the misleading deceptive conduct question. So I was just keen to look at the whole issue of equitable remedies and just briefly go over that ground with you. Firstly, the thing that I really wanted you to take away from that whole discussion about equitable remedies is that you're only ever going to get them if what? There's a big fat if in front of every equitable remedy.
If common law is not effective.
Yep.
The common law remedy.
Yep. So if damages are inadequate, you might have a shot at an equitable remedy. But if damages will do it and will compensate the other party for the default, then you're going to find that you won't be able to make a claim for an equitable remedy. So that's the issue there. In terms of specific performance, sometimes damages won't be appropriate, so you stand a good chance of getting specific performance. In two situations, they're the standouts for specific performance. Can you tell me the two main times when you're going to look at success for a request for an order of specific performance. Two different kinds of contract. No? Contracts, well, if we go back to the principle we just discussed, which is you only get a shot at equitable remedies if the common law is not going to do it for you. And you also think about the fact that damages are money to be given to one party to make up for the other party's default. Then it makes sense in terms of specific performance that contracts for land and contracts for things that are special or unique in some way are the two big ticket types of contract where specific performance is often successful. Because you can understand, particularly for land, every piece of land is considered to be unique in and of itself. No two pieces of land are exactly alike. And for that reason, you'll normally find courts say, well, damages won't do it. Okay, so you've got a much stronger case for specific performance. Similarly, if you've got a contract for something that is particularly unique and very special, then again, just getting money in the place of what you expected to get under that contract probably won't do it, and that's where equity will step in. Okay, so they're the two main times. The other things that, sorry, go on.
Sorry, is specific performance more of a rare sort of remedy? Like, is it because of the fact that the court is not going to follow up on something, you know, they don't want to be the primary school teacher and follow up on all that sort of stuff. So is it, I mean, I know it's for unique situations, but is it because of that reason that it's more rare of a remedy and that other remedies would be sought first?
Yeah, yes, normally. So I didn't quite, Tam, the beginning of what you said then was a bit on my end.
Sorry, I was just saying, like, specific performance, is it something that is not a remedy that is likely sought for because of the fact that the court don't really want to have to hold their hand?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, that's typically it. And you've hit the nail on the head, and I know I've already said it before, but you've led very nicely into exam tip number 2, which is, you need to know about those kinds of contracts that are not amenable to specific performance. So particularly, I have mentioned this case before. There's a case I'm thinking of. We mentioned it in one other tutorial.
Dylan?
Well, that certainly crops up in terms of damages and total failure of consideration. But when talking about specific performance, the big case is the J.C. Williamson and Lukey and Mulholland case. And in that case, we had a lease of a theatre. Well, actually, it wasn't a lease, it was a licence. Which
that was the food thing, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah. So can you tell me what the difference is between a lease and a license? What's the main diff between a lease and a license?
Well, if I'm getting it right, the license is a statutory component and is governed by statutory requirements.
No, nice go, nice shot. But no cigar, unfortunately. A lease will give you, if it's successfully executed and comes into force, will provide the lessee with an interest in the land itself. And that is why you have all of those very serious obligations in terms of the Property Law Act that require you to have the contract in writing and all of that kind of stuff, because what is actually being given away is something quite serious. It is a right in the land itself, and that is a little bit different to a license, which simply gives you a right to occupy but no interest in the land itself. Okay, so a license isn't limited to occupation of space. A license can be, I'm actually an intellectual property lawyer, so a license can be, a copyright license. It can be a license to use somebody else's trademark. It can be a patent license. There can be licenses given for endless number of things. And however, Tam, you are also correct in the fact that there are some statutory licenses. And some statutory licenses you must get before you can operate certain businesses. For example, liquor licensing. You must be appropriately licensed in order to operate a business with liquor on the premises. So licenses can be a statutory affair, yes, but very often they are not. But the main distinguishing point between them and leases is that issue of interest in land or not. In the Williamson and Lukey case, it was a license, and it was an oral license, okay? So what happened there was a bit of a wink and a nod, handshake deal, and the lessee of the theatre agreed that these confectioners could come on the premises and sell their confectionery and have their staff there selling and so forth for 5 years. The lessee then repudiated, and the licensee sued for a number of different things and pretty much failed on everything. They sued, amongst other things, for specific performance. And you are right, Tam, that they were denied that because of this issue of having to interact with each other. And that was the basis on which that remedy was denied, because the court can't, in subsequent cases, they've said, the court can't be the policeman. If you're going to order specific performance, it's kind of a once and for all thing. It's a decree from the court that says, thou shalt do perform obligation X. Do you know what I mean? And they can quite happily give it to the plaintiff. The plaintiff can give it to the defendant, say, no, you've got to do X. And then the defendant either does X or it doesn't. And, then if they don't, well, then that causes further grief. But that's the nature of a decree for specific performance, where you've got continued interaction between the parties. This is why, like you were saying, employment, in the employment arena, it's no good, where the court's going to have to be jumping in all the time because there's going to be squabbles between the parties. They won't order specific performance. So that's the issue there. Now, I'm just looking down here, defences. There are a number of different defences. And if you think about it, well, let me give you this feeder line and see if you can, spit some back at me. The feeder line is, think about the fact that this is an equitable remedy. Can you think of some examples where you might be able to successfully defend a request for specific performance?
Vitiating factors?
You're on the right. No. You're on the right track, because we discussed this when we were talking about the remedies for vitiating factors. For example, when we were talking about when were we?
So we're talking about the hardship and having to prove it has to be quite an extensive hardship.
Yes. Well, I'm thinking of the traditional ones like latches. That's a traditional defence in equity that normally will pop its head up wherever you've got an equitable remedy being sought. Similarly, things like where the plaintiff is themselves in breach, so you've got to come to equity with clean hands. Remember, we were talking about that when we were looking at remedies for the vitiating factors as well. where, well, you've got all of the other kinds of equitable defences there. In terms of mistake, that's the main. I can see where you're going there because they do discuss that in the text, Tam. Mistake and misrep. But I don't want you thinking that it's vitiating factors generally. So it's a bit more narrow. So yeah. Undue hardship is the other one. Yeah. Performance might be impossible or futile. Like I said, latches and informality. Sorry?
What about injunction? What about injunction?
Injunction, yeah, we're just finishing off a discussion of defences now, Mary. I was going to talk about injunctions, yes, right now, in fact. So you've given us a nice segue into injunctions. There are two.
Sorry, can I just digress just for 1 second, just so I've got my head around it. So commonly it would be latches. Definitely you need to enter into the contract with clean hands.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of where we're at?
Okay. Yes, all of those. Put it this way, the way I like to think about it, I'm a sucker for, informal ways of remembering things, but if the plaintiff themselves is a bit smelly, do you know what I mean? If there's a bit of a whiff of, something being unfair or inappropriate on the part of the plaintiff that's asking for the remedy, then you'll normally find that the court is a bit reluctant to go ahead and offer the remedy to that person. Clean hands is just a classic, latches. When I'm talking about clean hands, I'm thinking of the plaintiff being in breach or not ready, willing and able to perform themselves. That's just a classic. You can't go to court saying, oh, I want to make them do what they're supposed to do, when you're actually not willing to do what you've got to do either. Do you know what I mean? It just makes sense. So defences, I don't want you to see, if there was any question like this on the exam, please don't write, defences are applicable if the plaintiff is smelly.
Love it.
But if you do, I'll know what you mean. But if you do...
That might be half a point.
Yeah. Anyway, injunctions, we got two kinds. We got, what are they?
Interlocatory. What's that word?
Interlocatory.
Yeah, that one.
Yep. And that means interim. So that means interim, which would mean the other one is not interim. It's final. So it's interlocutory and final injunctions.
Okay.
And you can also have two other ways of classifying them are negative injunctions, that is prohibitory injunctions, or mandatory injunctions. So prohibitory injunctions just means that you're trying to stop someone from doing something, and mandatory injunctions means that you're trying to force them into doing something. Now, if you are thinking to yourself, hang on a minute, if I ask the court for an order for specific performance, because I've had this question before and it's a decent question. If you're asking a court for an order for specific performance, aren't you forcing the other party to do what they've promised? So isn't that kind of like a mandatory injunction? Can you see where people have made that connection there? No, you're not. It's the short answer. Okay, when you are asking for a decree for specific performance, it necessarily must be, well, for things that are fairly unique, because remembering, we have to have the non-availability of damages. The other thing is, when you're talking about injunctions, you have different tests that are applicable. So in your text, you'll see that they talk about particularly I'm thinking of, I don't know if this text, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think this text really goes into the whole balance of convenience tests that the courts go through in terms of, awarding a final injunction and all of that kind of stuff. But it's quite difficult to skip over all of the hoops that you need, particularly for an interlocutory injunction. And I'm here having a look at page 923 of the 2018 text, and I am looking at, let me just get you the page for the 2013 text. Okay, here. It doesn't even go through them. Oh, yes, it does. 899 of the 2013 text. You'll see those 3 bullet points there that they look at in terms of the hoops that you have to jump over for an injunction. So you have to show that there would be a serious question to be tried, and this is obviously for an interlocutory injunction, because if the court's weighing up to give a final injunction or not, obviously there was a serious question already tried, so you don't have to skip over that in terms of a final injunction. And balance of convenience is quite a thorny issue, and you'll no doubt go into that more deeply when you're looking at civil procedure. But it's quite tricky, and so you just need to be aware that that was a very long-winded way of saying a mandatory injunction is not the same as specific performance. Okay, 2 very separate things that you need to keep in mind. In terms of restitution, really the only thing that I wanted you to take away from the restitutionary chapter is looking at this issue of total failure of consideration. And we've already started to discuss it when we were looking at the Fibrosa case the other week in tutorials. But that's the main thing that I wanted you to take away from the part of the text on restitution. You can, in terms of where it's got that chapter on recovery, the sections on recovery of money, Baltic Shipping and Dillon is the one that I always bang on about in terms of TFC. Nice little case, but it does show you one of the main points of the whole seeking a remedy and restitution, and that is if you're going to be making a claim in contract and a claim in restitution for total failure of consideration, the court will force you to choose between your remedies at the end of the day. You can't have both a successful claim in damages under contract as well as restitution for total failure of consideration. Okay, we've already gone through that. So you should be feeling fairly comfortable with the whole Dillon side of things. And correct me if I'm wrong, but your contract A would have covered quantum merit in some detail. You go through Cadelpha, don't you, in terms of quantum merit? Tam, am I right? So, yeah.
To be honest, we didn't spend much time on it at all, but I mean, it was touched. But that was my experience. It might have been different for other people, but that was my experience last term. Okay.
Mary, did you cover quantum merit in contract A?
No, it was all new to me when you even mentioned the case and I read it. I mean, that's how little we did on it.
Oh, we did a fair bit on Cadelpha, but it wasn't. Actually, I don't think
the case was mentioned. It was put up in the list, but in terms of the perspective you've given on that never even entered into my study for it. You know what I mean? Like, I thought, wow, this is new.
Oh, really?
Is Cadelpha also something to do with terms? Because I think we actually covered it under that.
Yes. Implied terms.
Because I think that's where we actually covered it.
Yeah. Well, the remedy that was sought there, obviously, for the construction company was a quantum merit, and they were successful in that claim. And the text really just goes through the three main elements that you have to skip over, which is that you got a benefit, and that benefit was provided by the plaintiff to the defendant. So obviously in Cadelpha, Mary, you've gone ahead and looked at Cadelpha now, I'm assuming, so from what you said. So, you know, obviously the benefit was provided to the defendant because the blasting company had done a significant amount of work for the tunnel and the construction works there. Usually you don't have to worry too much about, you know, making great long arguments about benefit, because usually if you're going to raise a claim for a quantum merit, generally speaking, in 9 out of 10 cases, the defendant has been given a benefit by the plaintiff at the request of the defendant. So in the Cadelpha case, obviously there was a tender and Cadelpha won. And so very clearly, the State Rail Authority of New South Wales, or whatever their name was, that wanted the rail line built, had asked for Cadelpha to provide them the benefit of the construction works. So, you know, it's not really an issue that there's been a benefit provided from one party to the other. And where the defendant has requested it, like in those kind of situations, there's just that presumption there that there's been a benefit provided. So you don't really, like I said, you don't have to devote a whole lot of argument to that. In terms of expense, you just have to prove that, you know, whatever benefit was provided to defendant, usually at their request, cost the plaintiff something. And then thirdly, and this is where it gets all a bit grey sometimes, just depending on the facts of the case, the court kind of unpicks the factual matrix and says, well, is there something about this factual matrix that would mean it would be unjust for the defendant to keep whatever they've got? And in Cadelpha, you know, obviously they got the benefit of the construction works that had been performed. So was it just for the State Rail Company to keep the benefit of that and not pay anything for it? Well, the answer is, you know, fairly clearly no, it's not just. So that's all I really wanted to say about those issues. Now, I've deliberately not fiddled about with my screen at this point because I haven't known how long it would take for you guys to catch up. So what we might do is break here. What I will do is I'll stop the recording. In fact, I'll stop sharing now because the rest of the revision I want to do on misleading and deceptive conduct, and actually kick off the tutorial problem that we need to tease apart. So what I'll do is I will stop the recording and I'll jump out of the meeting, and then we'll restart the meeting and see if that fixes my internet issue. Okay? Cool. All right. Well, let's have a little bit of a break and go and get ourselves a cup of tea and maybe get back here at, say, 1:15. Okay, cool. All right. I'll turn